So now it's time we actually revisit CRUD so we can actually delete items from the database so our users have complete control over how this data is stored. And so to do this, we're going to actually emulate what we did originally with our detail view, but we're just going to do it in a delete view. So we're going to go ahead and come in here just like this. And of course, it's no longer going to be using the HTMX URL. We're going to go ahead and say object. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll change the context back to object, the actual string of object, and then we'll change the template. Okay, so we'll come back to doing all of this same stuff with HTMX later, but for now, we'll just stick to just pure old Django. Now, one of the ways we could think about doing this is by using the shortcut of get object or 404, just like this. Okay, and then the next part would be really if request.method equals to post, then I'll just do obj.delete, and then we'll return an HTTP response or maybe an HTTP redirect. So we can just do redirect and maybe to, pantry/recipes or something of that sort. Okay, so what's happening here then is in our delete.html, we really just need a form that triggers a post request. Because if we actually had this on a GET request, that means if they accidentally went to this view, it's going to delete it. This request method post is just verifying, hey, are you sure you want to delete this? And if you are, cool, then we'll go ahead and run this. So let's go ahead and implement a few things here. First off, before I go any further, I'll go ahead and say success URL equals to the reverse of recipes:list. That should be the correct URL now. So I'll go ahead and just put that in here. Now, we could use redirect to do that reversing, but I'm going to use reverse because I know I'm going to end up using that same URL most likely when we actually go into using HTMX. Okay, so with this delete view, let's go ahead and jump into our app's URLs, and we'll bring this one in here. And I'll go ahead and grab the original detail view here, and we'll just change things accordingly. And we'll go ahead and create our template as well. So in recipes, we'll just go ahead and say delete HTML. And this is going to be a lot like detail, but instead of the HTMX stuff, we're going to go ahead and say if object. So we definitely want to make sure we have an object in there. Then what I'm going to do is say something like, are you sure you want to delete object.title. Now, this right here could actually be reused a lot. If you remember back, my object is actually object.name. So, we can make it very specific to the recipe like we did in here, or we could actually make it very general. So this could be reused anywhere else. So I'm going to make it very specific for now. Next thing, I'm going to go ahead and do form method being post and then the action. We're going to go ahead and leave it in as the current URL with that dot there. And then CSRF token. And then come in here and say button type being submit. And now we'll go ahead and say yes, delete. Cool. So now we have a way to delete any given item. So let's go into our detail view. Now, of course, it's actually getting the HTMX version of this, which would mean in our partials, we have a way to delete this. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get rid of, I'm going to reformat this just a little bit, and I'll say edit. If there's an edit URL, then there should be a delete URL as well. And so let's go ahead and space this out a little bit more. And right next to edit, I will go ahead and put in delete. So notice I have a instance method, or I should have an instance method for this object as well. So we'll come back in to our model and use the edit URL for delete. And let's make sure that we actually did name it, but there we go. Okay, so back into my URLs, just double check, and there we go. We've got the delete. Okay. So this exact same concept should be reused again for our actual ingredients. But for now, I'm going to go back into my homepage here, or this item here. Nope, it says edit. Back in the detail, this should say delete. Okay, so we've got delete now, and here we go. Are you sure you want to delete grilled chicken taco? And then we can say yes. Okay, so that's of course one easy, simple place to put it, but we also might want to put it on the actual create update view as well. And perhaps we put it in the ingredients, perhaps we put it in the form. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the form itself. There we go. And so now I can go into edit, and then I can delete it right there. So let's go ahead and try this out by creating one and then just going to delete it. So, or I'll just grab one of these other random ones that doesn't actually have anything in it. So we say yes, and there it goes. It's gone. And it's gone for good. Cool. So that actually deletes that item. I think it's really simple to do. Now we can take this exact same method and we can do recipe ingredient delete view. And yet again, we could use this get object or 404. But since I actually want to have both of these with eventually having HTMX, I don't want this actually to work out this way. So I will change it when we get to HTMX, but we will leave it like this for now. This time it's going to be recipe ingredient. And I'll go ahead and add parent ID of none in here. And then recipe underscore ID being that parent ID. Okay, so recipes list is probably not necessary in this case. I do have the parent ID, so I could do recipes detail and then keyword args of ID being that parent ID. Nothing else I really need to change, right? So it's still going to look for that object if it even exists. So let's go ahead and bring this in to our URLs now. And yet again, I will copy this right here. And this time I'll put it above it. And we'll go ahead and say delete. I don't need the HTMX stuff in there at all. You can just put in delete like that. And there we go. Okay, so with the update views, it makes sense to have it as with all the HTMX stuff. And this, it does not. Okay, so I don't need HX to be at the beginning of it. So I'm going to go ahead and actually put this down with my other ingredients, right? Or the other actual views, the other CRUD views, the HX views, I'm going to just leave together. Okay, so we save that, and now we refresh in here. So the idea then is to be able to go to any given ingredient and click delete, right? And that should actually take me to a new page. Okay, so yet again, with the exact same thing that we just did, I'm going to go ahead and do this get delete URL on the recipe ingredient itself. It's going to be right underneath the get absolute URL. Now, the reason we can still use that get absolute URL is because there is no actual detail view for this ingredient. But I'm going to go ahead and add in some new keyword arguments here. In fact, they're the same as this get edit URL, the HTMX edit URL, that is. So there's our keyword arguments. And now the actual URL name, which was ingredient delete. There we go. So now we've got that. So now into our partials for ingredient inline, we have the button for edit. Now we can have a href to the object.getDelete URL and delete. You could say remove too, either one. Okay, so we come back in here, and now I've got these items. Let's go ahead and remove this cheese. Okay, so naturally it jumps over to this. So I actually have a lookup error. That's actually hopefully not that surprising given where we are with things. If it is surprising, let's fix it so it's not anymore. This user lookup, the recipe ingredient itself does not have the user, but the recipe, it does. So the recipe parent does. Refresh in here. And are you sure you want to delete cheese? We say yes. Now it tries to bring me back into the ingredient itself, right? So it actually didn't bring me back to the correct place. So let's go ahead and make sure that we've got all of our URLs set up correctly. Put a trailing slash here. And recipes detail. That's where it should be sending us back. Let's go into our recipes. And we got our grilled chicken taco here. We go ahead and edit that. Cheese remove. Yes, I want to remove cheese. It brings me back. Go in here. Cheese is gone. Okay, cool. Maybe I just needed to save a few things for that to work correctly. But now we have some fairly interesting things going on here. First of all, we have the ability to delete our original recipe. And then we have the ability to delete our recipe ingredient. That's pretty straightforward, I think, right? The post method is really important to prevent unwanted deletions, right? This is just a confirmation for it. The other part of this is we wanted to implement this before we actually implemented the HTMX because we want a fallback method for both of these that for sure works. That's kind of a two-sided thing for this delete view. But now let's go ahead and actually implement this with HTMX.